Hello everybody, welcome back for the second season of the Grand Prix Manager 2 for the 1986 mod. Now, last time Ossella finished second in the Constructor Championship after battling with McLaren all the way to the end. But before we get to the first race of the 1986 season, we should get on with the driver transfers. So, let's begin by talking about the drivers who were competing last season who no longer have driver's seats for this season. Gerhard Berger has been released without a seat this season, and so is Paolo Barella for Benetton. Now, Gerhard Berger scored 23 of the 45 points, so it's a bit of a surprise. Ella De Angelis for Brabham had also been released, even though he only scored 2 points for Brabham. I think Ella De Angelis did deserve a seat. Nigel Mansell had also been released, even though he had scored 24 of the 31 points. And Alan Berg, our test driver, had been released, even though we weren't really going to use him because his stats weren't that good. So those are the drivers being released. Let's now look at the driver lineups. We will start with Hasselhoff since they were last in the Constructors Championship. Alan Jones is maintained at driver number 1. Eddie Cheever, who was their test driver last season, has been promoted to the second driver spot, and Hub Rossengate, who was at the now bankrupt Sack Speed, is moved to be their test driver. Next up is Brabham, who finished 11th in the Constructors Championship. Ricard Petraci maintains at Brabham as their driver number 1. Josel Garza, who has replaced El De Angelis, where El De Angelis doesn't have a seat this season, as driver number 2. And Christian Danner as their test driver, who last season was Arrows' test driver. Speaking of Arrows, they're next on the list since they came 10th in the Constructors. Mark Sear and Thierry Boutsen are still driving for Arrows this season, and Gabriel Tarquini as a test driver to replace Christian Danner, who went to be Brabham's test driver. At Minardi, the driver lineup is exactly the same. Duchesne is the driver number 1, Alessandro Nini is the driver number 2, and Pierluigi Martini as the test driver. Next up is Ligier, who finished 8th in the Constructors Championship. Lafitte, who is the driver number 2, has been promoted to driver number 1 because René Arnoux has left the team. Philippe Alliot, who was their test driver last season, is the driver number 2. And their test driver is now Piccolo Ginzani, who was at Ossella last season, who got 3rd in the Drivers' Championship. At Ferrari, they have the exact same driver lineup, with Alboreto as the driver number 1, Stefan Johansson as driver number 2, and Bruno Giacomoli all remain at the team and the same driver positions. Terrell, who finished 6th in the Constructors Championship, have the same driver lineup, with Martin Brundle driver number 1, Philippe Streif the driver number 2, and Adrian Campos as their test driver. At Williams, they had a major reshuffle of the team. Jean Schlesser, who was the test driver last season, is now the driver number 1. Mike Thackwell, who didn't have a race seat last season, is the driver number 2. And Roberto Guerrero, who also didn't have a race driver seat, is their test driver. Next up is Benetton, who finished 4th in the Constructors Championship, with Gerhard Berger being replaced by the defending champion Alain Prost as the driver number 1. Teo Fabi, who was the driver number 1 last season, is now being demoted to driver number 2. And Jan Lammers, who didn't have a race seat last season, fills up the spot as test driver. Lotus, who claimed 3rd in the Constructors Championship, have kept Ayrton Senna, but they've replaced Johnny Dumfries with René Arnoux, and they've also kept Derek Warwick as their test driver for this season. Next up, the runners-up of the Constructors Championship was of course Ossella. And as you see, we have got Johnny Dumfries as the driver number 1 to replace Ginzani, who is at Ligier as the test driver. As Cathay, we kept for another season, and Patrick Tombe is now our test driver, who was at Haslola last season, who scored the only points Haslola scored. Also, we changed our engine supplier, so we're no longer Alfa Romeo, we're now at BMW. Last and absolutely not least, it was the reigning champions of the Constructors Championship, McLaren. and Nelson Piquet is taking Alain Prost's place as driver number 1 for McLaren. They have kept Keke Rosberg as driver number 2, and Ivan Capelli remains as their test driver for this season. Finally, before we start the second season of the 1986 mod, here is a table of the driver transfers. This shows what seats they were at last season and where are they now. Actually, before we get to the qualifying results of the first race for the Brazilian Grand Prix, there was a bit of a dilemma for the team. You see, the second season chassis that was supposed to be ready for the start of the sixth season, well, it was only 55% complete, so it was a big problem that we were having to face. So what happened was I hired more people and hoped to speed up the process, so not only would the second chassis be in time as soon as possible, but the third season chassis should be ready by then for the third season. So really feeling worried about that not happening. Finally now, on to the qualifying results of the first round of the Grand Prix in Brazil. Nelson Piquet took pole position in his McLaren with Ayrton Senna in second. Keke Rosberg took third with Michele Alboreto in fourth. René Arnoux in fifth with Stefan Johansson in sixth. Both Ossella drivers of Alex Caffey and Joy Dumfries qualified in the fourth row and outside the 107% time. That was because it was dry to begin with, but it suddenly got wet pretty quickly and both drivers were caught in the rain. The reigning champion Alain Prost is down in 9th with his teammate Theo Fabi in 11th. So José Garza for Brabham, Alessandro Denis for Minardi and Eddie Cheever in the Haas-Lola all won't be taking part for the first race of the season. Well, sadly, Johnny Dumfries, who qualified 8th in the Grand Prix, mysteriously disappeared, and I've started to realise why now at this point. It was because of when a chassis gets wrecked, it can't be driven, obviously, but for a while I had 2 cars and 1 wrecked car, and I never bought a new chassis for that wrecked car, so it'll explain why he's disappeared, because I just haven't bothered fixing that. But anyway, for the first race of the Grand Prix is underway with Alex Caffey maintaining 7th place. On lap 12, when people started to come into the pits, which was pretty early on in the race personally, Thierry Boots and the Arrows retired, which isn't really interesting at all, but Michele Alboreto and De Cesaris retiring roughly the same time, so that put Caffey into a points position by lap 14, but whether Caffey could hold on to it, that's another thing. By the 18th lap, Alex Caffey ended up retiring from the race, so it's not really a good start to the season for us, especially since we were the runners-up last season. However, we are using an outdated chassis because the one that we're supposed to be using is not ready yet. Theo Fabi for Benetton had retired, and so is Jacques Lafitte, who is just outside the points also. There was quite a mad scramble at the pits by about lap 25. That was because the track was starting to dry up and people came into the pits to change from wet tyres to dry tyres. Now, it kind of looked like Senna was going to have a chance at jumping Keke Rosberg, but it didn't really turn out that way, especially since very shortly after he came out the pits, he retired from 3rd place. So Lotus, who are pretty much battling McLaren for the title, they are going to have a bit of a disadvantage already. Coming to lap 56 of the Grand Prix, which is right about the end of the race, Keke Rosberg had retired, which handed 2nd place over to René Arnoux in the Lotus. Stefan Johansson got his way to 3rd place for his Ferrari. The reigning champion Alain Prost got into 4th in the Benetton. Keke Rosberg, despite retiring, managed to get far enough to get 5th place and 2 points for McLaren. Philippe Streiff got the final point for Tyrrell. Alex Caffey retired from the race because he had a collision. so not really a good start to the season. Just before we went to the second Grand Prix at Jerez for the Spanish Grand Prix, Michele Alboreto got injured and is out for 5 races, so Bruno Giacomelli in theory should be taking his place, and Michele Alboreto would return for the 8th round of the second season of the Grand Prix. Round 2 the Grand Prix at Jerez. Now, before we go for the results, Bruno Giacomelli was supposed to be taking part, but for some reason the second driver's seat was not given to Giacomelli. Instead it's given to Michele Alboreto, who's injured, so he can't take part. So that's why Stefan Johansson is the only Ferrari there. There's nothing I can do about it. I don't know why it's happened other than the fact it just has. But anyway, look at the results. Both Benettons took the front row, with Teo Fabi over a second quicker than Alain Prost. Both Lotuses took the second row, with RNU leading Ayrton Senna, and Nelson Piquet leading Keke Rosberg for the third row. Joy Dumfries was down in 11th, and more worryingly, Alex Caffey, who's just made it out of the bottom 3 drivers, down in 19th. So really not good for Ossella, but once again the situation is we don't have the updated chassis yet. It probably won't be until after, if I remember rightly, the 5th or the 6th round, so we're going to be stuck right at the back. We're not going to win the championship at all. It's just not going to happen. It's too unrealistic to suddenly win the championship with having the updated chassis with like 10 races to go in a 16 race season. Just isn't gonna happen. But anyway, Josel Garza, Philippe Alliot in the lead sheet, and Andrew Chesler in the minority all would be taking part. At the start of the race, both drivers managed to maintain their positions as Joy Dumfries managed to hold 11th and Laffite stuck at the second to last spot in 19th. After about 10 laps of little drama, but except some drivers being overtaken, both Benetton drivers, who were first and second, both retired at the exact same time. A huge blow to Benetton, as it looked like Prost and Fabi collided while they were first and second. Now, just after Alex Caffey came to the pits, Joy Dumfries retired from 9th place, and Alex Caffey would be in 11th because Sean Schleicher managed to jump him through the pit lane until Sean Schleicher retired, which put Caffey back into 10th place. On lap 61, just before the end of the race, Keke Rosberg from 3rd place managed to bin it for the second race in a row, right to the end where he's in a podium position, which would have been helpful for McLaren, but this time he scored no points in that race. Fairly shortly after Rosberg's retirement, René Arnoux from 2nd and Marc Suhr in 6th place all retired from the race. Now, unfortunately, that wasn't enough for Alex Caffey to get into a points position for Ossella, but it was a very dramatic ending to the race where Ayrton Senna won, with Streif taking 2nd, and Thierry Boutsen for the Arrows took 3rd place. Nelson Piquet finished in 4th, Johansson finished 5th, and Arnoux managed to hold on long enough for 6th place. In the Drivers' Championship, Nelson Piquet had a 3-point lead over Senna, and René Arnoux and Streif have 7 points after just 2 races out of the 16 races this season. And in the Constructors, Lotus have a 2-point lead over McLaren, which is probably thanks to Keke Rosberg spinning off twice in a row this season. Round 3 for the San Marino Grand Prix at Imola saw Teo Fabi taking pole position for Benetton. René Arnoux took 2nd for Lotus, with Jacques Laffite in 3rd place for Ligier. Ayrton Senna took 4th place, and both McLarens took the 3rd row. The reigning champion Alain Prost qualified in 7th, just ahead of Joy Dumfries and Ossella in 8th place. Alex Caffey didn't make it within the 107th time, and it was in 16th place, which is good enough since Alan Jones and Eiichiro both Hassola, as well as Josel Garza, will not be taking part for the Grand Prix. In the formation lap, Alessandro Nannini, who qualified in 13th place, had stalled his car, so he had to start from the pit lane. And at the start of the race, no one else stalled, as Cathy went up to 15th, whilst Joy Dumfries maintained 8th position. But Ayrton Senna retired before the first lap was even completed, which was a very, very odd thing to see happen. Joy Dumfries was able to make his way to a points position since a lot of drivers came into the pits about laps 12 and 13, which was a very, very early move to make, which did give the indication of a 3-stop strategy. Once Joy Dumfries came out of the pits for his first pit stop, he pretty much retired shortly after his pit stop, and shortly before Alex Cathy did his pit stop also. Annoyingly, Alex Cathy retired pretty much the same way Dumfries did, retired just after the first pit stop. By about lap 43 of the race, Teo Fabi had retired from the lead of the Grand Prix, so this had been a huge blow for Benetton, who started to appear that might be a potential title contender for the Constructors' Championship, not just Lotus and McLaren. With nothing else happening in the Grand Prix, René Arnoux took the race win, with Nelson Piquet in second place and Alain Prost took the final podium position. In fourth was Keke Rosberg in the McLaren, and both towers of Steve Brundle took 5th and 6th. Both our drivers retired because they spun off the track. Not great, is it? In the Drivers' Championship, Nelson Piquet is in the lead with René Arnoux second, and in the Constructors, Lotus have a 2-point lead, while Ossella still have no points. Round 4 of the Grand Prix is at Monte Carlo, and Joy Dumfries takes Ossella's first pole position of the season, with both McLarens in 2nd and 3rd, Stefan Johansson taking 4th, and both Lotuses are on the 3rd row. Alex Cathy down in 12th and once again outside the 107% time, and the reigning champion Alain Prost 7th ahead of his teammate Teo Fabi in 9th. The 3 drivers not taking part are Patrese, Schleicher and Suhr. On the formation left, Joy Dumfries, who qualified in pole position, has stalled his car, so he will have to start from the pit lane, so he's going from first to last, just like that. So Osella's chance of some points was definitely out the window. Alex Cathy down 12th, sounds very, very unlikely that he would be able to get into a points position. Thanks to some cars pitting really early, Dumfries managed to get his way up to 12th just behind Alex Cathy, but more importantly, Ayrton Senna from 2nd place had retired from the Grand Prix. Joy Dumfries managed to get into 9th place, but sadly for him, he ended up retiring from the Grand Prix, which left Ossella with Alex Cathy, who was stuck in 11th place, so we're not exactly in a very good situation for Ossella to score points at all. So the race started with potential that Ossella might score the first points of the season, until Joy Dumfries stole his car and then retiring from the race. It definitely was a lost opportunity for Ossella to capitalise on. Everyone came to the pits with a few laps left to go because the track had dried out, but the 2-hour time limit was pretty much hit, but it didn't really affect the position at all. So Nelson Piquet won the race for McLaren 1-2, and Alain Prost in the Benetton, the defending champion, in 3rd place. Stefan Johansson took 4th, Arnoux 5th, and Teo Fabi took the last point. Joy Dumfries did not spin off the track this time, but he instead had an engine failure, so it's not a good sign to have a BMW engine failure. Round 5 for the Belgian Grand Prix at Spa, and René Arnoux took pole position for the Lotus, with Eddie Cheever in the Haas Lola taking 2nd on the grid. Ayrton Senna was 3rd in the other Lotus, Teo Fabi 4th in the Benetton, Joy Dumfries in the 3rd row with Keke Rosberg in the other McLaren. Alex Cathy was all the way down in 14th, and the defending champion Alain Prost in the Benetton in 7th place. Only 2 people didn't make within the 107% time. That was Alan Jones in the other Hasselhoff and Mike Thackwell in the Williams. Off the starting grid, Joy Dumfries managed to hold in 5th place, but Alex Cathy managed to gain a position to be in 13th place. By lap 11, Most people came into the pits for a three-stop strategy, including A Achiever in third place, but when he came out of the pits, he was all the way down into the bottom group of the drivers running. So A Achiever had immediately fallen out of the points. Immediately he came into the pits, which is a real shame for Ossella, because to qualify second for Ossella is really impressive, but the time of his pit stop clearly has let him down on this occasion. So by the time when both drivers came to the pits, Dumfries was in 4th and Cafe made his way from 14th to 7th, so both Ossella drivers really managing to get their way up the field to hopefully score their first points of the season. Cafe did end up losing a couple of positions, but Jolly Dumfries managed to maintain 4th place, which is very, very handy, especially since it will be Ossella's first points of the season. Though we aren't going to be up there with McLaren or Lotus this season, but as long as we get some championship points, that'll be really handy, especially for sponsorship to get money. So, but Ready RNU went on to win the race with Taylor Farrell taking second, Ayrton Senna and the other Lotus taking third, Dumfries in 4th, the reigning champion Alan Prost in 5th, and the current championship leader of Nelson Piquet taking 6th place for McLaren. Just before the 6th round of the Grand Prix, our brand new chassis had finally been built, which means we should now have a faster car, so we should be a bit more competitive. But now I just gotta hope that Ossella can get the chassis for Season 3 done before Season 3 starts. That is what I was a bit concerned about at this point of the series. The qualifying from round 6 for the Canadian Grand Prix at Montreal saw Johnny Dumfries again taking pole position with Keke Rosberg in 2nd. Piquet and Senna took the 2nd row with RNU and Johansson taking the 3rd row with Alex Caffey in 7th position, probably his best qualifying result of the season. The reigning champion Alan Prost in 8th, where his teammate Taylor Fabi did make the 107% in 10th place. Alan Jones, Mike Sackwell and Josel Garza all won't be taking part for the Canadian Grand Prix. Off the starting line, both drivers managed to maintain 1st and 7th, so we were off to a pretty decent start for Ossella. Now, I wish there was stuff I could show you in this Grand Prix, but it wasn't until lap 51 when there was actually something to highlight, and that's Joey Dumfries retiring. This was the most boring race so far this season because there was literally nothing to highlight until lap 52 out of the 69 lap Grand Prix. A few laps after Dumfries retired, both Ayrton Senna and Alex Caffey retired, but that was the only highlight of this entire Grand Prix. Keke Rosberg won the Canadian Grand Prix with his teammate Piquet in 2nd to make a McLaren 1-2. René Arnoux in the Lotus was 3rd, Prost was in 4th, Fabi in 5th, and Streif in 6th. Joy Dumfries and Caffey both retired with engine issues. Again, we seem to have unreliable engines from BMW. Round 7 of the season took place at Detroit City, and Joy Dumfries once again gained pole position with Nelson Piquet in 2nd, Keke Rosberg is in 3rd with Alboreto in 4th. Stefan Johansson is in 5th and Ayrton Senna rounding up the top 6. René Arnoux is down in 7th with reigning champion Alain Prost, who in 8th place, out-qualifying his teammate Taylor Fabi, who was in 14th place and didn't even make it within the 107% time, and nearly did Alex Caffey in 12th. The 3 people not taking part were Jean Schlesser, Andrew DeCesare and Alan Jones. On the formation lap, Josel Garza, who qualified 10th on the grid, had stalled his car, so he had to start from the pit lane. A really crushing blow for the Brabham driver. Off the start line, both drivers maintaining their positions. Dumfries in 1st and Caffey now at 11th, thanks to Garza having to start from the pit lane. On the 28th lap, Alex Caffey retired along with Jacques Lafitte, so Caffey lost his 8th position and Lafitte lost his 7th position in the race. On lap 51 of the race, Joy Dumfries had retired from second place, so once again an opportunity for Ossella to score points has just gone out of the window. A few laps later, lap 56, Alain Prost retired from second place in his Benetton, so the former champion defending his title was out of the race, and so was Nelson Piquet, the current championship leader. So René Arnoux has a good opportunity to close the gap or even overtake Nelson Piquet in the championship. By the end of the race, Ayrton Senna manages to win for Lotus with Michele Alboreto in second and René Arnoux in the other Lotus taking third place, so a double podium for Lotus. Theo Fabi finished in fourth with Brundle in fifth, and Thierry Boutsen got the last point for Arrows. Both our drivers retired from spinning off. René Arnoux with a 1 point lead in the Drivers' Championship over Nelson Piquet, but it's still a very, very tough battle between both drivers for the title. And in the Constructors' Championship, Lotus with a 3 point lead over McLaren since they both drivers retired from the Detroit Grand Prix, while Ossella still at 3 points in 7th in the championship. Round 8 for the French Grand Prix at Paul Ricard shows Joy Dumfries taking pole position with Nelson Piquet in second. Keke Rosberg took third for the other McLaren with the reigning champion Alain Prost in fourth. Theo Fabi was in fifth, and completing the top 6 was Stefan Johansson in the Ferrari. Alex Caffey was all the way down in 16th on the grid, which is not good at all. Giselle Garza, Schlesser and Stewart will not be taking part in the race, while Alan Jones, who the only other driver to didn't make the 107% time, will be taking part. At the very start of the race, Andrew De Chester, who qualified 20th on the grid, had stalled his car to get out of the race, while Joy Dumfries was still in first place and Alex Caffey was still in 16th place. It was a very hectic start. A lot of people were retiring early in the race. Most notable was Michele Alboreto from 7th place in the Ferrari had retired early on. On lap 26, Joy Dumfries came to the pits for his first stop from 2nd place, but unfortunately he got a time penalty because of the problem with the refueling rig, and that probably had definitely contributed to him losing 2nd place and dropped down a couple of positions into 4th place. It got worse for Joy Dumfries because he dropped down to 6th position after being overtaken by both Benetton drivers, which meant behind him now was René Arnoux, one of the championship contenders for both the drivers and the constructors, was chasing behind him now, and so it kind of felt like Joy Dumfries is probably going to fall out of the points, and therefore we aren't going to score any points for this French Grand Prix. Once Joy Dumfries completed his second and final stop of the race, he dropped out of the point position thanks to Ayrton Senna overtaking him. But Joy Dumfries would soon get some form of lifeline, and that lifeline is Stefan Johansson retiring from 3rd place in his Ferrari. So with Johansson out of the way, that gives Dumfries a fighting chance by promoting him back into 6th place and potentially scoring 1 point for Ossella. The race ended with a 1-2 for McLaren. Piquet winning the race, Rosberg in second, and Alain Prost, the defending champion, third for Benetton. Theo Fabi finished in 4th with Ayrton Senna in 5th, but thankfully Joy Dumfries finishing in 6th. So we get a point for Ossella, which is exactly what we've been needing for the last few races. Round 9. For the British Grand Prix at Brands Hatch, Joy Dumfries taking pole position with Thierry Boutsen rounding up the front row in his Arrows. Alain Prost, the defending champions, in 3rd with Ayrton Senna in 4th. Both McLaren drivers taking up the 3rd row with Keke Rosberg in 5th and Piquet in 6th. Alex Caffey finishes the qualifying in 11th on the grid. So the 3 drivers not taking part are Bo Pathlolis and Sean Schlesser in the Williams. Off the start of the race, Joy Dumfries managed to keep 1st place while Alex Caffey maintaining 11th place. 5 laps into the race, Prost has overtaken Johnny Dumfries, but this is not what this little highlight's about. Boutsen for the Aris retired, Keke Rosberg retired, Alain Prost retiring, 3 people retiring from the front, René Arnoux retiring, which gives Piquet a really good chance to extend the lead in the Drivers' Championship between him and Arnoux. Johnny Dumfries soon came to the pits for his first pit stop of the race, but he ended up losing a couple of positions because Fabi and Senna managing to get past him, but it doesn't really matter how many positions Johnny Dumfries gained or lost because he eventually retired from the Grand Prix, which is really disappointing, especially since Johnny Dumfries is in a points position, so it would have been helpful for Ossella, and Cafe had also retired from the race, which is really frustrating, especially since both these drivers are supposed to be helping Ossella to score some points, but all they're doing is just throwing chances away. Further into the race, lap 42 of the race, Michele Alboreto retired from 5th place for Ferrari, as long as Marc Surer, who was down in 8th place out of the 11 remaining drivers. Further into the race, Stefan Johansson from 3rd place had also retired from the race, but that also meant Mike Sackwell in a Williams would have the chance to score Williams their first point throughout the entire season. That's right, we are 9 races in and they have not scored a single point. But Teo Fabi won the race with Ayrton Senna in 2nd place and Nelson Piquet taking 3rd. Felix Dreyfus 4th, Stefan Johansson somehow managed to hold to 5th, and Jacques Lafitte got the final point for Ligier. So Mike Sackwell and Williams still haven't scored a point. So Nelson Piquet now have a 12-point lead over René Arnoux in the Drivers' Championship, while in the Constructors, McLaren have an 8-point lead over Lotus. Haslola, Brabham, Williams and Minardi all still haven't scored any points so far, and we're more than halfway into the season. Before the 10th round, 2 people were injured as before the German Grand Prix at Hockenheim. Alain Prost is out for 5 races, Keke Rosberg out for 1 race, so for the German Grand Prix, neither of those drivers will be taking part, their test drivers will be taking their place. Okay, round 10 of the German Grand Prix Hockenheim proved to be the weirdest qualifying session so far this season. Johnny Dumfries taking pole position with Teo Fabi in 2nd, Jan Lammers and Ayrton Senna make up the 2nd row, Jan Lammers who is replacing Alain Prost, who is injured, René Arnoux taking 5th for Lotus, and As Cafe running up the top 6, the first time this season he's been up there. Now, Garza, Denis and Brundle will not be taking part, but as you notice, there's only 16 cars. That's both drivers from McLaren, both drivers in Ligier, both drivers in Haslola, and both drivers at Williams. All did not set a lap time, so they all will be taking part along with Brundle, Denis and Garza, so only 13 cars out of the 24 will be taking part for this race. Off the start of the race, Dumfries managed to keep hold of 1st place and Ascafi managed to keep hold of 6th place. On lap 10, Teo Fabi managed to overtake Johnny Dumfries for the lead of the race, which isn't that interesting, but immediately Teo Fabi got past. He retired from the Grand Prix. That put Dumfries back into the lead and Ascafi getting up into 5th place. After both Ossella drivers made their pit stop, Ascafi retired from 5th place, while Jan Lammers manages to overtake Johnny Dumfries to take the lead of the race. And bear in mind, Jan Lammers has replaced Alain Prost because Alain Prost is injured and Jan Lammers is their test driver. Well, after Jan Lammers got past Johnny Dumfries and Ascafi retired, the action pretty much died down and everyone's turn positions was pretty much set in stone for the end of the race. So, Jan Lammers on his first race of the season, replacing Alain Prost for his injury, is going to win the German Grand Prix. Johnny Dumfries in the Ossella is going to get 2nd, so 6 very needed points for Ossella there. Ayrton Senna in 3rd in the Lotus, with René Arnoux taking 4th. Stefan Johansson in the Ferrari taking 5th and Felix Streif taking the final point. Alex Caffey retired for spinning off circuit again. In the Drivers' Championship, René Arnoux is still about 9 points behind Nelson Piquet, while René Arnoux didn't really capitalise on Piquet not being in the race. In the Constructors, Ossella is up to 6th place in the Constructors' Championship, so we've gained a position, though it's not really going to be much help for the team. Round 11 of this season brings us to the Hungarian Grand Prix for the Hungaroring. Johnny Dumfries taking pole position, with Josel Garza taking 2nd place. Thierry Boutsen in the Arrows taking 3rd, and Nelson Piquet, the current leader of this championship, in 4th. Keke Rosberg in 5th, and Stefan Johansson running up the top 6. Alex Caffey down in 9th, and for I think it's the 4th or 5th time this season, did not make it within the 107% time. Neither did Lotus, who are down in 11th and 12th, so really shocking qualifying from them. And then you got Benetton 14th for Teo Fabi, and Jan Lammers 19th, so they've also had a shocker in this qualifying. But the 3 people not taking part are both Haslolas and Andrea Chesris in the Minardi. On the formation lap, Mike Thackwell, who qualified 13th on the grid, had stalled his car, so he had to start from the pit lane. And off the start, Stefan Johansson, who qualified 6th, had stalled his car, so he was out of the race. So Caffey was up to 7th, and Johnny Dumfries maintained the race lead. By lap 14.77 race, a lot of people coming into the pits to do what I assume is 3-stop strategies. That helped Caffey get into a points position, and not just in the points position, but he got to about 4th place because all these drivers were just pitting in so early, and some of them even get 10-second stop-go penalties, which just helped a lot more. After the pit stop window, Dumfries was leading the race, and Caffey was in 4th, just being with both McLarens in between them in 2nd and 3rd. Tell you something quite big has happened. René Arnoux earlier in the race, though we've missed it, had retired from the race, but also Nelson Piquet, the championship leader, has retired from the Grand Prix, so neither championship contender was going to score any points from this race. Johnny Dumfries then retired from the lead of the race. That put Keke Rosberg back into the lead, Ayrton Senna 2nd, and Alex Caffey 3rd. This was pretty much the end of the race. Keke Rosberg won for McLaren, Ayrton Senna got 2nd, but more importantly, Ossella got their first podium of the season. Jan Lammers, the test driver's 4th, Teo Fabi 5th, and Sanjani from Minardi got 6th, so Minardi got their first points of the season. In the Drivers' Championship, Senna, out of nowhere, is now become a championship contender, 7 points behind Nelson Piquet after 11 races. McLaren have only got a 4-point lead over Lotus so far. Haslola, Brabham and Williams are the only drivers to have not scored any points so far this season. Round 12 for the Austrian Grand Prix at the A1 ring sees Johnny Dumfries in pole position, Keke Rosberg taking 2nd place, Piquet and Stefan Johansson take up 2nd row for McLaren Ferrari, Alex Caffey and Michele Alboreto in the other Ossella and the other Ferrari, rounding off the top 6. Teo Fabi is down 7th, where his teammate Jan Lammers for Benetton is down in 11th. The 3 people not taking part are Riccardo Patrese, Eddie Cheever and Josel Garza. On the formation lap, Jean Schlesser, who qualified in 16th, had stalled his car, so he had to start from the pit lane in his Williams. Off the start of the race, Johnny Dumfries dropped down 2 positions to 3rd, while Alex Caffey was in 7th place. On lap 20, René Arnoux, one of the championship contenders, retired with Jan Lammers, who was down in 10th place. René Arnoux' chances of winning the title was slipping away by each Grand Prix he retires, and giving Nelson Piquet a chance to extend the gap between him and Arnoux. Ayrton Senna and Nelson Piquet, the 2 championship contenders, still in 5th and 6th. If either one of them retired, it could mean potential run to the end of the championship. After both Ossella drivers made their pit stops, Caffey was in 3rd and Johnny Dumfries into 4th. That pushed Piquet down to 6th place and Senna was out of the points in 7th. However, as Caffey retired from the race, letting Senna back into a points position, even though he would score less points than Nelson Piquet. After Piquet and Senna made the second pit stops, they were able to jump Michele Alboreto, who pitted earlier in the race, and Joy Dumfries managed to maintain third position behind Keke Rosberg in the other McLaren and Stefan Johansson leading the race in the Ferrari. That was pretty much all to highlight this race. Stefan Johansson wins for Ferrari, Keke Rosberg took second, and Joy Dumfries took the final pole position third. Piquet took fourth, Senna in fifth, and Alboreto took the final point in sixth. Alex Caffey retired from the race because he spun off the track again. In the Drivers' Championship, an 8-point lead between Piquet and Senna, with Keke Rosberg now overtaking Renier New. So Keke Rosberg still has a chance to take the title also. In the Constructors' Championship, McLaren had an 11-point lead over Lotus, so it was going to be a very, very intense battle to the end of the season between Lotus and McLaren. Round 13 for the Italian Grand Prix at Monza, and Joy Dumfries taking pole position with Eddie Cheever in the Hassler taking second. Ricard Patrese is third for Brabham with Theo Fabi Benetton in fourth. Jan Lammers in fifth place with Philippe Streiff taking sixth on the grid. The four championship contenders of both McLaren and Lotus. Both Lotuses are 10th and 11th on the grid, and both McLarens are 13th and 15th on the grid, so Lotus have a good chance to get more points out of this Grand Prix than McLaren. The three drivers that won't be taking part for the Grand Prix are both Ligiers of Philippe Alliot and Jacques Lafitte, and Alan Jones in the other Hassel, where his teammate Cheever qualified second place. This looked like it's going to be an intense race. On the formation that Martin Brundle, who qualified 16th on the grid, had stalled his car, so he had to start from the pit lane. At the start of the race, Caffey stayed in 8th place, but more importantly, Joy Dumfries stayed in 1st place. At the start of the race, Theo Fabi from 4th place had retired, while Ed Cheever overtook Joy Dumfries to take the race leads. By lap 8, Joy Dumfries fell all the way down from 1st down to 6th place after being overtaken by Thierry Boutsen for 5th place. After the first pit stops were done for both Ossella drivers, Joy Dumfries fell all the way down to 17th place before eventually retiring for the Italian Grand Prix. That was pretty much all the highlights of the entire race, because the rest of it there was literally no activity, but the strange thing is, both Lotus and McLaren were going to score no points for this Grand Prix, especially since Nelson Piquet, the champion, retired, but Renier New or Senna wasn't going to be able to capitalise on it because they were in 12th and 15th, and his teammate Keke Rosberg in 10th, none of them in a points position. But Jan Lammers, the test driver for Benetton, won the race with Ricard Patrese in the Brabham second, Philippe Streiff took 3rd place for Tyrrell, Boutsen was in 4th, Cheever got 5th, which is Hassler's first points of the season, and Mark Suhr took the final point in 6th. Joy Dumfries retired because he spun off circuit. And with 3 races to go, Nelson Piquet still has an 8-point lead over Ayrton Senna, which is a very, very commanding lead over second place. Williams are now the only team to have not scored any points this season. Before the 14th round for the Portuguese Grand Prix Estoril, Joy Dumfries and Mike Thack were both injured in the last Grand Prix at Monza, so they will both be out for the rest of the season. Round 14 for the Portuguese Grand Prix Estoril, Thierry Boutsen took pole position with Arrows and Alex Caffey took second. Ayrton Senna was in 3rd with Theo Fabi taking 4th, and both McLarens took up the 3rd row. Renier New, one of the 4 championship contenders, was down in 7th. Patrick Tambay, who has replaced Joy Dumfries for the rest of the season, is in 13th on the grid, and Roberto Guerrero, who replaced Mike Thackful for Williams, qualified in 14th place. The 3 drivers not taking part were Martin Brundle, the Tyrrell, Alan Jones in the Hassler, and Mark Suhr, all failed to make the 107% time and were the bottom 3 drivers. Off the start of the Grand Prix, Alex Caffey managed to hold 2nd place and Patrick Tambay held on to 13th place. By about lap 12, both Ferrari drivers who were 8th and 9th had retired from the Grand Prix, suggesting both teammates collide with each other. Once both drivers had pitted, Alex Caffey would drop down to 3rd place, with Patrick Tambay in 13th. Theo Fabi took the lead of the race, with Ayrton Senna in 2nd, Nelson Piquet was 4th, and René Arnoux is in 5th, and Rosberg was in 6th. So the championship title for the Drivers' Championship and Constructors was very much on for this and possibly for the other 2 races remaining this season. By about lap 58 of the race, from the lead of the race, Theo Fabi ended up retiring, which gave Ayrton Senna the lead, as Caffey went to 2nd, Piquet was now in 3rd place with Arnoux 4th, and Rosberg in 5th, so it was a very, very dramatic turning point for the Grand Prix and potentially for the Drivers' and Constructors' Championships. But soon after Theo Fabi retired, Ayrton Senna retired from the lead of the race, so Lotus's chance to close the gap to McLaren in the Constructors' Championship had gone out the window. Piquet was now in 2nd, Rosberg 3rd, René Arnoux was now 3rd in the Lotus, and Alex Caffey went on to win the Portuguese Grand Prix. But thankfully we got our first win of the season, but it only came with 3 rounds to go. Eddie Cheever got 6 for Ossella, and Roberto Guerrero scored his first points for Williams this season. So Williams' test driver has scored Williams their only points of the season. In the Constructors' Championship, Nelson Piquet has a 12-point lead over 2nd place, which is now Keke Rosberg. René Arnoux and Ayrton Senna both tied 42 points and were 14 points behind, so with 2 races to go, Nelson Piquet could wrap up the championship in the 15th Grand Prix, and in the Constructors, Lotus are now 16 points behind McLaren, so again, McLaren could wrap up the Constructors' Championship by the 15th round. Just before the 15th round for the Mexican Grand Prix Mexico City, Alessandro Nannini had been injured and is out for the rest of the season also. So we've got 3 people out on injuries at the same time at this point, and they will not be returning until some point next season if they have driver's seats by then. Round 15 of the Mexican Grand Prix sees the returning driver of Alain Prost taking pole position for Benetton. Ayrton Senna, one of the 4 championship contenders, in 2nd on the grid, with Theo Fabi in 3rd. The current championship leader, with the potential to take the title after this race, is in 4th, with Keke Rosberg in 5th. Andrew de Cesaris takes 6th on the grid, with René Arnoux, the 4th and final championship contender, all the way down in 8th on the grid. Alex Caffey took 11th on the grid, and Patrick Tambay will not be taking part as he's down 23rd and outside the 107% time. Pierluigi Martini, who is Alessandro Nannini's replacement for the rest of the season, is down in 17th place on the grid. Off the start of the Mexican Grand Prix, Alex Caffey held on to 11th place. After most of the front runners made their first pit stop, Alain Prost was leading in the Benetton, with Ayrton Senna in 2nd. Nelson Piquet in 3rd, Theo Fabi, who was in 4th, had retired from the race at this point, Keke Rosberg was now in 4th, Stefan Johansson 5th, and René Arnoux was in 6th place. So, it looked like Lotus might cut down on points in the Constructors' Championship, but the gap would still be quite difficult to beat by the 16th round as things were standing at this point. By about lap 33, things started to get interesting. De Cesaris, Keke Rosberg, Johansson and Arnoux had all retired at roughly the same time during the race, so Prost was leading it, Ayrton Senna 2nd, Piquet was 3rd, Philippe Streif was in 4th, Roberto Guerrero in the Williams in the points position again and might score more points for Williams, and Martin Brundle was in 6th. So in the Constructors' Championship, Lotus would have 6 compared to McLaren's 4. Ayrton Senna would cut the gap between him and Piquet by only 2 points, but Ayrton Senna came to the pits for his 2nd pit stop, putting him down into 3rd place. So whether Senna can catch Nelson Piquet, and the answer was no. Piquet jumped Senna, which means the gap would actually end up increasing. Mexican Grand Prix managed to end with Alain Prost on his return to Formula 1 taking the race win, with Ayrton Senna losing 2nd, and Nelson Piquet finished his race in 3rd place. In 4th we had Philippe Streif in the Tyrrell. Roberto Guerrero manages to get more points for Williams, and Martin Brundle got the final point position for 6th place. In the Drivers' Championship, PK was a 12-point lead over Senna, which means he has officially won the Drivers' Championship as he can no longer be caught. In the Constructors' Championship, McLaren are 14 points ahead of Lotus. So unless a 1-2 finish from Lotus and McLaren score no points in the last Grand Prix, then McLaren have officially won the championship. The 16th and final round saw Alain Prost taking pole position for Benetton again with Alex Caffey in 2nd. Both Lotuses took the 2nd row with Philippe Streiff in 5th, and Andrea de Cesaris rounds up the top 6 for Minardi. Keke Rosberg was in 7th, and Nelson Piquet, the official drivers' champion, in 9th. Now, as you can see, only 23 cars set lap times. The one person that was missing during qualifying was Teo Fabi, Prost's teammate for Benetton. Philippe Alliot, Martin Brundle and Alan Jones all didn't make the 100% time, and they will not be taking part for the final race of the season. Off the start of the race, Cafe maintained 2nd place and Patrick Tomby held on to 8th place. There really wasn't much to talk about until the very first pit stop when Alex Cafe came into the pits, but unfortunately Patrick Tomby was trying to come into the pits at roughly the same time, so therefore he just missed the pit box entirely, and so Alex Cafe retired, and getting Patrick Tomby to the pits didn't work at all because, like I said, he missed the pit box, and though he had to retire from the race because he had 0% left on his tyres, so very stressful indeed. Meanwhile at the front, Alain Prost was still leading the race. Both Lotuses were 2nd and 3rd, but they both need to get past Alain Prost to beat McLaren in the championship, especially since when they're not in the points position in 7th and 8th. On lap 64, Keke Rosberg had retired from the race, which means it was down to Nelson Piquet to score 2 points to guarantee the win for McLaren. However, with Prost still leading the race, McLaren were still going to win the championship because the only way they can win is to get a 1-2 finish, and Nelson Piquet does not score any points at all. But Philippe Streiff overtook René Arnoux to get into 3rd place, so it really looked like Lotus were going to lose the championship in this final race of the season. The race eventually ended with Alain Prost winning for Benetton. Ayrton Senna got 2nd place for Lotus. Philippe Streiff took 3rd for Tyrrell. René Arnoux got 4th, Stefan Johansson was 5th, and Andrea de Cesaris got the final point in 6th. So, it was official, McLaren have now won the Drivers' and Constructors' Championship. So the Drivers' Championship showed Nelson Piquet won the Drivers' Championship by 6 points over Ayrton Senna with 54 points. René Arnoux finished the championship with 45 points, just 1 point ahead of Keke Rosberg in 4th. Alain Prost got the 5th highest amount of points with 38 points, just 6 behind the McLaren of Keke Rosberg, but he got 12 more than Teo Fabi, who finished 6th in the Drivers' Championship. Philippe Streiff got 25, just ahead of Stefan Johansson, who had 24 for Ferrari. Looking at the second page of drivers, Jan Lammers with 21 points to finish 9th could only be described as a test driver, did an amazing job for being Alain Prost's replacement when he got injured. Both Ossella, Joy Dumfries and Alex Caffey got 10th and 11th with 27 points between them, which was really disappointing, especially last season where he did really good. Thierry Boutsen in the hours got 8 points, Michele Alboreto got 7 points for Ferrari, Patrese got 6 for Brabham, Brundle got 4 for Tyrrell, Roberto Guerrero, who was the test driver and he'd only competed for 3 races this season, got 4 points, and they were the only points Williams got this entire season. Looking further down the page, Eddie Cheever scored 3 points for Haas Lolas, which were the only points Haas Lolas scored this season. Both Nani and Cesaris for Minardi got 1 point each this season, so it's been disappointing for Minardi this season. Jacques Lafitte got 1 point, which was the only point Ligier got all season, and Marc Surer, the last driver to score points for the season. Mike Sackwell got no points. Pierluigi Martini got no points for the last 2 races of the season to replace the injured Nannini, and Philippe Alliot did not score points either. And here are the remaining drivers who didn't score points this season: Giselle Garza in the other Brabham, Sean Schleser in the Williams, Alan Jones in the Hassler, and finally our test driver of Patrick Tambay, who did not score any points this season. In the Constructors' Championship, Lotus only missed out by 5 points to McLaren. Benetton weren't that far behind with 85 points because of thanks to Lammers, Fabi and Prost all giving off really good performances in their Benettons. Ferrari finished in 4th with about over 50 points behind, but most of the points was Johansson, who scored, I think it was 25 of the 31 points. Terrell, Felix Street scored the vast majority of points. I think he scored 28 or 27, so the vast majority of it was thanks to Felix Street scoring a lot of points for Terrell. Ossella finished in 6th with both drivers of Dumfries and Caffey giving it about the same amount of points. Arrows got 9 points, all thanks to Thierry Boutsen. And Brabham, where Ricard Patrese scored all 6 points and Giselle Garza scored none. So, the remaining 4 drivers in the Constructors' Championship, Williams scored 4 points because Mike Sacco got injured and Roberto Guerrero took his car and scored those 4 points for Williams. So they have to thank Roberto Guerrero for that. Haslola A. Cheever scored all 3 points for Haslola. Alan Jones got none, and both Haslolas struggled to qualify to even get into the races, let alone score points. Minardi, Nannini and Chesas both scored 1 point each, and Liché finished last in the Constructors with only 1 point thanks to Jacques Lafitte, who scored that only point for Liché. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this season, and hopefully you'll enjoy Season 3 of the 1986 mods.